what I'm about to say is not going to apply to all Korean people that you will meet in Korea. What I'm going to say is my personal experience with Korean people that I've met. Now, with that out of the way, I'm going to start talking about my experience living in Korea as an Asian Westerner. When I meet Koreans for the first time, and this happened when I met my co-teacher as well as my hairstylist, typically they first ask me where I'm from, knowing that I'm a foreigner. So I always answer Canada, and they will sort of look at me like, oh really? Canada? Like they don't believe. They expect me to say I'm from China, Japan, or another Asian country. And then I'm like, yeah, I'm from Canada. And they're like, so your parents are Canadian? Canadian? Another response I get a lot is one of your parents Korean? And if I say no, they get shocked a lot. Like, oh, then like where are your parents from? And then I would say, oh, they're from China. And they're like, oh, why are you in Korea? So many times I get asked, why are you in Korea if none of your parents are Korean? I just wanted to share this with you because I've never had that kind of response in Canada. Like nobody is like, oh, none of your parents are white, why are you in Canada? You know, like it's, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know if I'm explaining this properly. I grew up in Canada and in Vancouver where it's like mostly immigrant families. I didn't understand the perspective of Koreans, and so I was actually quite offended. Like, what do you mean I can't be Canadian if I'm Asian? Like, don't you know how many Asian Canadians and Asian Americans exist? But I guess they really don't know because a lot of them have not been to an English-speaking country. And most times they would ask me, if your parents are Chinese, why don't you teach English in China? Why are you in our country? And Koreans use this phrase a lot. They always say 우리나라, 우리나라, our country. Instead of like in Korea, they always say 우리나라. Makes sense because they're Koreans and it is their country. But I guess I never say our country when I refer to Canada. I always just say Canada. So if I meet a foreigner in Canada, but see, the concept of foreigner is a lot different in Canada and I assume in the United States as well because there are so many immigrants. I don't really just look and be like, oh, he's a foreigner. Like I wouldn't know that he or she is not Canadian unless I talk with them, right? But in Korea, obviously they wouldn't know if they just look at me, but like to other foreigners, they can spot and be like, oh, he or she is not Asian, does not look remotely Korean, he or she is a foreigner. In America and in Canada, if you're black, if you're Indian, if you're Asian, you may not get stared at. But if you're black and you're white and you're something not Asian, you will get stared at. Because there's just not a lot of foreigners in Korea comparatively. Like there's more of an in and out sort of mentality, us versus them mentality in Korea for sure. And that is one of the most difficult things you will get as a foreigner. In Canada, I never got asked like, oh, your parents are Chinese, why don't you go back to China? Why are you in Canada? You know? And I guess if I got asked in Canada, it would be more offensive. Like, is this racism? I've been lucky in that I haven't really experienced much discrimination after the initial surprise that I am a Chinese Canadian and not a Korean Canadian or, you know, a white person. But I have heard stories from some friends of mine who work in hagwons that it is true, the rumors that fly around town about it being tougher for Asians in general to work in Korea compared with a white person. Oh, actually, I've also experienced it personally, firsthand, one time. So when I was applying for jobs in Seoul non-English teaching jobs, I came across this job posting that was teaching English, but it was like teaching English to corporate, like teaching business English or something like that. I applied to the job and I got a call right away saying they wanted an interview, but the lady was like, please send me a picture so I can check your race. So I can check your race. What? I just didn't respond to her. What do you mean you want to check my race? What does it matter what race I am? If I graduated from an English-speaking university, I speak fluent English as demonstrated in my resume and cover letter, whatever. So why do you need to check my race? That is just one example of, the difficulties you will have, especially for English-related jobs. If you are trying to teach English in a corporation, or teach English in a hagwon, and you're not a white person, you will probably run into these difficulties. And from what I've noticed, it's the same for jobs in entertainment as well. TV programs featuring foreigners generally recruit white people when it comes to being representatives of the English-speaking country. It makes sense for TV because, say if they recruited Korean expats to represent all the different countries, there wouldn't be much diversity on screen. So I get it. If you are from Philippines, from Thailand, from other parts of Asia or other parts of the world, and you don't look Korean, but you're not white, you are also at a disadvantage, from what I've heard. If they are looking for a foreigner role, like a cameo foreigner to appear in a drama or on a variety show, they want someone white, regardless of how well you can speak English. Because I have seen many foreigners who appear on Korean television and they're supposed to be, Mr. Smith from England, but they're obviously not from England. They probably have English as a second language, but they got the face, so they got the job. So if you look Korean, and you could be of Korean descent, but you grew up in another country and you don't know how to speak Korean, you will sort of be a letdown. And if you can speak Korean well, it's not really impressive because they expect that if you have Korean blood in you or if you look Korean, you should be able to speak Korean. If a white person speaks the same amount of Korean as I do, or even less, even if it's very short, like a self-introduction. 안녕하세요. 저는 누구누구입니다. 저는 미국 사람입니다. 반갑습니다. Everybody in the room will be like, 너무 멋있어요. 너무 잘하시네요. But to me, they're like, okay, yeah. The response will be totally different because they expect me to be Korean. And you know what? It's the same with English. Even if I am more educated and I have better English vocabulary and grammar and pronunciation than a white foreigner, they still think that I am not as good as the white foreigner. I mean, they should know that it's not in your genetic makeup to speak a language from the day you're born. So it shouldn't matter if you're white, if you're Indian, if you're Chinese, ethnically. But for a lot of Koreans, they just can't really wrap their heads around the fact that you could be a native while looking not like a native. And historically, if you want to go that far, actually, the natives of Canada and America are not white. And rant over. Okay, thanks, bye.